we were very successful as a group of staff and players of creating a bubble, for want of a better word, but an environment that enabled us to focus on the day-to-day, to stay relaxed, to work through our processes, to maintain our behaviours regardless of proximity to matches and time in the tournament. And we were able to do that within the confines of our base camp and the facilities and the processes that we'd put in place. And I think for me, from a very personal point of view, the time when I was acutely aware of the excitement and the buzz was just being on the team bus pulling into the stadium for each of the games, because that's when you saw the seas of fans and supporters and the excitement and obviously also being in the stadium. But on the day to day, we went about our business in the way that we go about our business.
Kate, how are you? Great to see you.
And yourself, Steve. I'm very well, thank you. I'm enjoying the fact that the sun's shining today alongside the frost, which has been a marked improvement on the last couple of days. But yeah, very well, and really pleased to be here. Nice to see you.
Oh, so pleased and chuffed to connect with you again after all these years. But yeah, just to maybe have a conversation, a little tap into some recent experiences. That'd be fantastic. So thank you so much for coming on. Right, so let's start off with Euro final. Whistle goes for full time. Where's your head at?
Just thinking back to those moments, it's a funny one. There's so many elements of that period that are so vivid, and then there's others that have blurred, I think, a little bit. Honestly, though, there wasn't really a moment at any point where I thought it wasn't going to go our way.
Is that because you're an
I don't
optimist?
know
Is
whether
that
that's
because
just extreme confidence or blind belief, but I can't necessarily recall a single moment throughout any of our games at all where I thought, where I didn't think that we were in control and it wasn't going to go our way.
that's interesting? And I'm keen to get your retrospective view, at least, of whether that's your approach, that's the way that you tend to work, or whether it is informed by knowledge. And that's one of the things that I've felt in the pressure moments of seeing athletes I've supported and watching them perform and not being able to do anything. So I've got this flurry of intensity of thought, but then sometimes quite a bit of calmness. I might be a good steadying force for a parent or another fan, because I've got knowledge, because I think I know how this is going to go, because you've been there, done it with them, and you know the capacity that they have.
I think it's a mix of three. I think there's probably a mix of three different things for me. Number one, I'm an optimist anyway. So the glass is always half full. Number two, because of the role that I do and because of the exceptional people that I have the opportunity of working alongside, everything is so well planned and rehearsed. And three, my viewpoint on those moments is that in an ideal world, your job as a sports psychologist and in fact any member of a sports science medicine team, including coaching, is to do everything that you can do to provide the best opportunity for success. And ultimately, looking through competition from a psychologist lens, what you're just wanting to see is that players are able to execute their best and their game plan under pressure. And and obviously winning is the dream, and everybody that's involved in high performance sport wants to win. But you win by having a really good understanding of how. And so whenever I'm watching competitions of teams, athletes, individuals that I've had the opportunity to work with, I'm watching it through the eyes of, are they producing what they intended to produce in this context? And that to me is more important than a win or a loss.
Yeah, okay. So it's not looking for some magical boost in performance. It's, are you delivering to what you expect to with a rational
What you're
logic view on it?
capable of. And there are some individuals and there are some teams
Yeah,
that actually perform better
yeah.
when the pressure is really on. But through working with people over time, you understand that that's what they're capable of. And so then after that, it's very different. Watching, you want with every being of your body to win, and I don't think you'll ever that will ever be any different. But I think you can put things into perspective a lot easier if you are able to execute a performance that you are happy with.
And in that sense of being able to view it as the performance as opposed to the result, does that better prepare people for if it doesn't go their way, if the result perhaps doesn't quite land?
I think everybody's different, aren't they? I think everybody's different. Everybody's view of the world is different. Everybody looks through a slightly different lens. Everybody deals with success and failure differently. And I don't think it's fair. I don't think necessarily it's fair to say that being very process oriented and focusing on performance makes it hurt any less or more. I think that is more influenced by people's individual characteristics and the way in which they process their world.
So it was a blur for you. Were you calm? I mean, as the extra time started to continue and getting closer to the final whistle, the goal goes in. How's your emotions go in that intensity?
I think it was, as much as anything else, I put an appreciation for watching phenomenal women play world class football in a sold out stadium. And so there was so much involved in that. It was obviously what was happening on the pitch. It was the environment. It was everything to do with that day. And actually, the other matches through that competition as well. It was
Mm.
the Euros tournament was bigger than all of us. And the FA talk about united the game and inspiring the nation. And it was just a wonderful example of the power of sport, creating a environment and an opportunity for unbelievable women to play top flight world class football in front of 90,000 people and inspire millions of people, not just back in the UK but around the globe. So it was just a phenomenal thing to be part of. And then obviously I'm watching that through a psychological lens, and are they managing the game, are they in control, are they self-regulating, and yes to all of those things. And like I said, whether that was optimism, whether it was confidence, whether it was absolute faith in an unbelievable group of staff and players, or a heady mix of all three, there wasn't really a moment where I didn't feel that it wasn't going to go our way.
Mm. And so perhaps between the games and across the tournament, what's your sense of how useful an understanding of the external moment, that united aspect of, the country coming together and realizing this is an incredible step change for the sport? Is that something you want to harness, or is that something you want to regulate for the players at all?
It's a really interesting one. And I remember when I first started out as a sports psychologist 20 odd years ago, and I remember one of the senior athletes that was competing in the sport that I was working with saying that they've missed some of the biggest and best competitions they've ever been involved in, because they've just been so concentrated on themselves, their role, their job, their process. And it's been a really it's really interesting to speak to other people and hear different perspectives on this. There was a staff member at the FA that I spoke to recently that wasn't it part of the immediate team, but is obviously part of the wider staff team. And every single person that the FA has been involved in some way, shape, or form this summer. It was a result of many people's hard work, and then reflecting on, oh, they feel bad for us that we missed all of the fanfare and
Yeah.
the noise and excitement that was going on outside. And I find that a really interesting perspective, because for me, I would never ever swap the position.
Yeah.
And working as a sports psychologist and being part of multidisciplinary teams for several years now, you do talk about the bubble, and you'll be familiar with this,
Yeah.
Steve, talking about the bubble of the Olympic Games, the bubble of the Euros. It's exactly the same. We were very successful as a group of staff and players of creating a bubble, for want of a better word, but an environment that enabled us to focus on the day to day, to stay relaxed, to work through our processes, to maintain our behaviours regardless of proximity to matches and time in the tournament. And we were able to do that within the confines of our base camp and the facilities and the processes that we'd put in place. And I think for me, from a very personal point of view, the time when I was acutely aware of the excitement and the buzz was just being on the team bus pulling into the stadium for each of the games, because that's when you saw the seas of fans and supporters and the excitement and obviously of also being in the stadium. But on the day to day, we went about our business in the way that we go about our business, and people's behaviours and approach didn't change regardless of where we were in the tournament or proximity to game. There was absolute consistency. It was a calm, safe,
Yeah.
friendly, relaxed, professional environment.
It's a strange one, isn't it? You want to keep things normal, but you want to harness the special feeling of that moment, and think about how valuable that is to someone's life experience as much as anything, to soak it up rather than be blinkered from it.
Absolutely, but I think that it's also a really special experience made up of lots of special moments of being within a team in a major tournament and being around teammates and around staff, and everybody is well aware of what we're in and what we're about and what may be. You can never ever block that out, and nor should you. It's part, as you said, it's part of the process and it's part of the story. But within that, you do you do have a job to do, and you want to create an opportunity to optimize your performance and give yourself the best opportunity for success. And I strongly believe that comes from having real clarity on game plan, principles of success, markers of principles of play, markers of success, but winning behaviors, the way that you go about your business, and keeping some consistency around some of those things. And there is always opportunity to enjoy the moments, and that's something that is encouraged. And the interaction between the players and the fans at the appropriate moment around games, that type of stuff is something that they live, that they relish, that they thoroughly enjoyed. And when you hear the players speak, and you see some of the opportunities that they've had post a tournament, they are passionate people that absolutely love their sport and see the opportunity and the power of sport to inspire hundreds of thousands of people, and that they've utilized that opportunity and they've used this as a platform to be able to do that. The letter to the Prime Minister, the promotion of sport in schools, they are using their platform, they are using their voice, because for some of those individuals, particularly some of the more senior of the team, the opportunities when they were youngsters were not the same. And I think many of them probably grew up dreaming about the opportunity of playing of sold out Wembley in front of 90 odd thousand people. It's just the summer was phenomenal for so many reasons.
Mm, for sure. And it has that sense of probably a tipping point feel to it that it's irrevocably going to be better as a consequence, or it's going to be on a progressive, even more accelerated path. Could you go back a few steps? And so I'm not quite sure how long it was before the final that you started with the team, but it wasn't long, was it? What did you?
I came into post in
Okay,
October last year. So October last year. So what's that? 9 months, 10 months
yeah.
before. Yeah.
So what did you encounter? And do you have a sense of the sorts of things that you thought you might be working on, or you might looking to develop, versus also what you encountered, and then being able to shift your focus based on what you see in front of you?
It's a really interesting question. And for me, I started out predominantly working in individual sport. So I
Mm,
spent many years working with GB diving and the diving team, which is obviously a close skill sport. And I did that for several years before I began working in team sport. And when you go through your training and you go through your qualification process, you you don't necessarily know how to apply the knowledge that you've learned to every single scenario. And so there was two things that were really obvious to me going from diving then into professional rugby, which is the sport that I started to work in next. Is you're now in a not in a closed skill sport, and actually decision making is a huge component of that, and your performance does depend upon the interaction that you have with others. And number two, when there's 50 people in a squad, you're not going to get very far doing lots of individual one-to-one consultancy work. So you have to think differently and you have to be able to work differently. And we talk a lot about working systemically as a sports psychologist, but what does that actually mean, and what does that look like, and what does that um what how does that show up on a day to day? And for me, I had to work differently within that environment, and the way that um you get performance gains is by working systemically and working through and alongside coaching staff, and getting sports psychology as much as possible onto the grass. And what I probably would say is that there's two things that have probably guided what I'm looking for when I start working with a team. And one is the opportunity to have worked with teams for some 10, 15 years now. And two is a big piece of work that we did at the English Institute of Sport post the games in 2016, which was all around what does systemic sports psychology look like, and what is the framework for how you deliver sports psychology systemically in high performance sport. And so I've now got a framework that I work to. So regardless of any scenario that I'm walking into, I'm sense checking where that team are on certain characteristics that I believe through both of those experiences to be really important. So whenever and then the work that you do with the team depends upon where the team are and what they actually need. But I believe that there are some critical success factors that need to be in place. So whenever I start with a new team, I'm assessing where is that team, where is this environment in relation to what I believe through knowledge, through experience, through working alongside some uh, very extraordinary people. There are certain things that I'm looking at.
So, Kate, I'm interested to get your thoughts because you mentioned there about uniqueness. So, I'm keen to get your thoughts about how you would go about supporting people to for the team's benefit. If maybe they're a bit of a maverick, a bit of a renegade, they perhaps don't necessarily conform with the team's needs, and how you go about supporting them. Perhaps sometimes when those people have got some special skill or they've got an outstanding match winning ability, but they can fall against like what the team needs sometimes?
Um, I think there's a piece around, and this is obviously where team sport is interesting, isn't it? Because of the dynamics of people within. Um, in all the teams that I've worked with, there's been a very strong team first mentality. Um, and I think that it is the responsibility of everybody within that environment to have a really good understanding of who is in the room, and an understanding of those individuals and how they operate and potentially why they operate in the way that they do. And we are always trying to identify what are the super strengths of each individual staff and players, what do they bring, and how do we create an environment that gives them the best opportunity to bring their strengths. And I think that that's a really important piece of work, but that goes hand in hand with an equally piece of important work around having very clear and unambiguous standards of behaviours and expectations of everybody within that environment. And I think that when that work is done well, and when it is led from within, and when it is, when people are have the people feel able to take risks, to make mistakes, to get it wrong sometimes, but to be able to learn from that. They're clear in what's expected of them. It gives a foundation for people to be able to hold each other to account and have an open and honest conversations at times around what is helpful and what is not in terms of the performance of a team. Um, and maybe it's just luck, but I can't think of a scenario in the teams I've worked with where somebody has had to leave a team or has not been appropriate within an environment because of behavior. I think that people are different, and I think we should be embracing cognitive diversity, and I think we should be developing our skills and our opportunity to look at the world through multiple different lenses. Does that make management of a team more difficult? At times, yes, but ultimately, I believe that the evolution of that team and the ability to move beyond current capability is probably greater.
Mm. Yeah, here. I think it, in that sense of conformity, is not an ambition. It's actually can dilute performance in that sense. If you, it puts the onus on, like you say, the management and leadership skills to get the best out of the unit parts.
I
What?
think it's being realistic as well about standards that are being set, because I think you can have non-negotiables in terms of principles of play and what is being executed on field, and I think you can have non-negotiables in terms of what's expected off field,
Mm,
but they need to be realistic and they need to be um, team generated and thoroughly discussed. Because what you don't want to do is to create environment that somebody has to police, and there are so many rules and regulations that it just becomes untenable.
yeah.
So I
Okay.
think the question is, what is actually going to make the difference? What are the things that are non-negotiable, that we believe are non-negotiable, that are actually going to get in the way of of us being successful? And they're the things to go after. And you know, again, it's having an understanding of what are we doing currently that's really working for us, that we can't afford to lose. What are we not doing that's not working for us and that we need to rectify immediately. And keeping those conversations going and keeping that updated as you move through. We had very well defined what we called winning behaviors that were generated from the players and from the staff as a self-reflection in terms of where the team were at currently and what they believed needed to happen in order for them to give themselves the best opportunities for success. And that's discussed in detail. But like anything, there's a difference between words on a wall and things actually being lived on a day to day, isn't there? And I think the proof of the pudding is, are the things that have been discussed actually being lived? And I can honestly say, certainly through the summer and certainly through that phenomenal team of players and staff group, the behaviours were being lived on a day to day and were evident in everything that that went on, whether that was on the field or off the field. I think it's probably the best example of people actually living by the standards that they identified as being important and being conducive to success.
It's super interesting to chat to you, Kate, and I'm also keen to ask you maybe just one last question about you've spent your career supporting and developing other people, developing cultures, developing systems, um, and for you, I'm intrigued to see and hear about how you keep growing and developing as a person too.
I actually think I've been incredibly privileged to have worked in many environments with exceptional people, and there isn't a single job that I've done where I haven't learned as much as I would hope that people have picked something up from me. I've had the absolute privilege of working with a multitude of different coaches that have been exceptional at what they do, and science and medicine support staff and players. And in every single environment that I've had the opportunity to work in, I've learned a huge amount from the people that I've had the privilege of being able to operate with on a day to day. And partly that is to do with the cognitive diversity piece that we spoke about. Different people think about the world in different ways and look through different lenses, and there's always an opportunity to pick something up and learn from that. And then I think it's fair to say that being part of the English Institute of Sport and the team there was absolutely fundamental to my growth as a practitioner. It's very difficult not to develop when you're surrounded by a team of 29, 30 other people in the same career that are doing the same job, and you have a great opportunity to use each other as a logical sounding board, to share ideas, to observe practice, to collaborate, to work together. I think just being in the UK sport high performance system has enabled me to develop and to grow and to evolve, and equally hopefully shape the practice that goes on in a lot of the areas of our country too.
One of my memories of working with you and spending time in meeting rooms was that you'd always come up with this phrase, or we'd hit a dynamic, and you go, "That's interesting because, oh, that's interesting," and you'd explore it, and that curiosity just sounds as though you are sort of trying to unpick and understand what is happening, as opposed to maybe putting up the barriers or feeling threatened by it. So that was one of my enduring
I,
memories of
I
working with you.
think, well, it's probably difficult to manage at times, Steve, as well, but I think that I think that's why I went into psychology.
Yeah,
I
okay.
just love it. I absolutely love psychology. And I think people go into psychology for different reasons. I think people have either done sport and exercise science and kind of found psychology, and then it's been something that they've been interested in, or there's people that have just has just studied psychology and then end up moving into sport. I just find the human brain and human behavior absolutely fascinating, and I always have done. And ever since being younger, like I read books around, forensic psychology, and I find it fascinating that why people would behave or think or act in a certain way. So that curiosity piece is it's just I think something that's quite inherent in me. Yeah, I'm a bit of an observer. I like looking at what's going on, and then there's always this internal narrative of, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, this is, yeah, well, yeah, well, I think that's a healthy mindset for anybody really, of rather than thinking I know what's happening here or I know what the solution is, to be stepping back and getting perspective and observing
There's
and
just
mindfulness.
there's always a reason for everything, isn't it? And I know this is a phrase that's used quite often in psychology about all behavior is understandable in context, but
Yeah.
it really is.
So
And
to be
quite
thinking
often
about the
we
driver behind a behavior as opposed to,
absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely, and we don't always have access to everybody's context, which is
yeah.
why I think curiosity around other people is so important.
Listen, lovely talking to you. Amazing to hear your insights, and power to you and the team for what you have created and supported to happen last summer. And yeah, amazing to see the successes.
Oh, thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me on, Steve. It's been really nice to catch up with you and see your face after all these years.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kate.
Thanks a lot.